Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining me. I'm going to talk today about how we as a company gained our cloud expertise and became cloud proficient, and how you can do the same as we did. So let me start off by showing you what we are going to talk about now. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is why become cloud native. So this is a story about what we as a company did, but what you can do. And I think it starts with why. Why would you do this? After the why, we're going to the what. So what did we do to define cloud proficiency? What does it mean for us? And what can it mean for you? And then we'll try to substantiate everything so you can use our experience and show you how we did it, technically and socially. And lots of demos are included, of course. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Piet van Dongen. I'm a cloud consultant at Luminis, which means that I spend most of my time helping organizations drive innovation using cloud technology, either by advising them or by implementing stuff, or a combination of both. We develop and implement cloud-based and data-driven solution and aim for the shortest time to value while improving customers' resilience. Last year, I published a white paper on cloud migrations, which you can download at this link, tinyurl.com/cloud migrations. I would love for you to read it and give me some feedback. And if you'd like to get in touch, then you can follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Okay, enough about me. Let's head on to the why. But before that, I wanted to define what the cloud is and is not. So maybe you remember these funny stickers, and they are funny, but they are also a little bit cynical and wrong, because the cloud is not another data center at the end of the internet. And from this slide onwards, I will use the definition as created by the NIST, the US National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is that the cloud, as I'm talking about it, is on-demand self-service. So employees can provision what they want without any interaction with humans, which saves time. It is broadly network accessible, so you should be able to work from home, from the Starbucks, from you name it. Resources are pooled, so you don't need to think about physical details, and costs are predictable and low. Elasticity. Oh, is my screen too large? Really? Is that for everyone? Otherwise, I have to resize it. Let me know if anyone else has a problem. Okay, so that's probably you, Bob. Maybe you need to do something, resize it or something. Okay, let me continue. So rapid elasticity means you can automatically scale up and down with virtually no ceiling. And measured services means that everything you do is measured and visible, so you can control your cost and usage. Okay, so that's what cloud is. And if I'm going to say cloud from now on, this is what I mean. Now, I promised you the why. Why should you become cloud native? Or you can decide for yourself after this. So the first thing I want to drive home is that you have to see things from the customer. So your customer or your client's end user, and your customer has a dream, and they are looking for ways to realize that dream. Organizations are selling a product or a service. For example, if you sell skateboards, you sell a plank, some wood, some paper on it, some wheels underneath, some screws and bolts. But that's not what your customers are buying. Your customers are buying a better life. And what you often hear is that you should upgrade your users and not your product, or maybe don't build better cameras, build better photographers. So that's the way we look at users. About innovation, because if you sell a service or a product, you need to innovate to be able to win in the marketplace. So the world does not stand still. Customers don't, competitors don't, and each innovation creates a new normal. So what's special today is normal tomorrow, and that creates a need to innovate. So you have to work each day on what is special tomorrow. And innovation means making new things or improving existing things. And the faster and more flexible you are, the greater the chance that you are the first to create something new or improve something. So if you are too slow, someone else will beat you to it. If you're not flexible enough, someone else will outmaneuver you. And if you're nimble but making the wrong thing, that's not innovating. So thinking is not enough. You have to act. You have to experiment, build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn, and get better at that every day. So Theodore Levitt said, creativity is thinking up new things and innovation is doing new things. Peter Drucker said it more concisely, you need to innovate or die as a company. So building on that, to continuously innovate, you have to start a sort of flywheel of innovation. And that way you can deliver faster every day and learn what your client or your customer does and does not want. So you and your customer will then discover and refine their job to be done, if you remember the skateboard from 2 slides ago. So if something fails, you want to discard it as quickly and painlessly as possible, which is also called fail fast. And the focus here is nimbleness or agility, short time to value, maximum flexibility. And like Thomas Edison said, he hasn't failed, he just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. And that's how he invented the light bulb. And the light bulb, as we know it today, is an iteration of the original one. Okay, so then on to cloud. So let's have a look at organizations that are masters of innovation. And I didn't come up with this. These are facts from the Accelerated State of DevOps report. And what they did is have a look at organizations that are using software technology to produce services or products. And if you group these organizations based on their performance, you get low, medium, and high performers, and a new group, an absolute elite, the leading group. And if you compare these low performers with the elite, you see huge differences. For example, how quickly can these organizations put ideas into production? Well, the elite can develop ideas in a few hours and deploy on demand. And the rear guard, the low performers, take at least a month, sometimes up to a half year to implement changes, and then only release in batches 1 or 2 times a year. So that's a huge difference. And there is a spectrum, but the elite is far ahead of the rest. Then running performance. The elite introduce much less errors and can recover from failure really quickly, so in under an hour, where the rear guard takes weeks to restore services. And to make things worse, the elite barely introduces errors, and the low performance they do. So if you put this all together, then it's like looking at a marathon or a Formula 1 race or a bicycle course, the Tour de France. So the elite is in a class of its own, way ahead of the rest. And they have a public secret. And you've already guessed it based on my talk title, and that is the cloud. So the elite are 24 times as likely to leverage cloud technology compared to the rear guard. And now the good news, the cloud is available to anyone. So all those hundreds of managed services are waiting to be used. The entry fee is extremely low. Anyone with a credit card can start now, and you only pay for what you use if you use it correctly. And that means that experimentation, like we talked about, the need to innovate needs experimentation, has become super cheap. And if your experiment fails, you just turn it off, stop paying for it, fail fast. You only pay for what your customers are actually using. So that means that the cloud scales with your success. You don't have to invest in tons of hardware and maintenance. You can take all that money that you would have spent there and put it into almost pure innovation now. And that is what I think the cloud has to offer, the public cloud. And that is why anyone that is serious about software should consider the cloud seriously. So this is the why. And like Newton said, if you're using cloud, that's not what he said, but you are standing on the shoulders of giants, like he was. He didn't come up with everything himself, but he used others' ideas. Right, so now the what. What is cloud? And what is cloud proficiency? Okay, so a little bit about our company, because the context of this talk is what we did in our company. Our company is not one big company with a single office somewhere in the center of the Netherlands, but we are some sort of collective of locally oriented companies, and each of them is independently responsible for their results. So that works really well for us, since that reduces a lot of overhead and it increases the speed and local correctness of decisions. So we have virtually no management pyramid, which means each colleague has a lot of responsibility and control themselves. And when people have to connect over company boundaries, for example, project teams for larger clients or a focus group for temporary organizations, they know how to find each other. So let's focus on one cell. In this case, Rotterdam, in the west of the Netherlands. So like I said, we have very little overhead, and almost everyone spends most, if not all, of their time adding value for clients. So we are engineering heavy, we are very software focused, but we want to be able to fully help our clients innovate. So we have project managers, consultants, designers, front, back-end engineers, and so forth. But the majority of our population is in engineering. And we believe that to be able to innovate with our clients, everyone in our organization needs to be cloud native, or as we call it, cloud proficient. More on that in a few slides. So that means that everyone has to understand and be able to explain what the advantage of cloud is, like I did a few minutes ago. And everyone that talks to our clients needs to become cloud proficient. So not just these engineers, but also salespeople, UX designers, front and back end engineers, project managers, directors, everyone that talks to a client needs to become cloud proficient. That's not easy. And that's why you joined this talk, I guess. So what we did, we started categorizing required cloud knowledge to these, let's call them blood types. So the sales group role, the engineering role. And like we saw before, these are generally the types of positions or roles we have at our company. And I think this is very transferable to other companies. Maybe you have a few different roles or you name them differently, but if you're software heavy, you probably have this mix of people. Okay, and now we define some themes for these knowledge groups. For example, basic. So that means basic cloud knowledge. For example, you could divide this into subgroups: basics of Azure, basics of AWS, cloud fundamentals, etc. Then there's compute, covering stuff like virtual machines, containers, data for databases, but also machine learning in our case, operations, so how to manage cloud environments and platforms. And a last example is business, so the things like cloud economics or consultancy. And now we have this empty matrix, and we can start to quantify the needs for the different roles we have. So let's start with the backender. I think that everyone has to know the basics. So that's a full need to know. They, of course, need to know about compute. They are backend engineers, and something about databases. It depends on the type of engineer. You can customize your learning path yourself, but you need to at least know something. Operations, I think our teams are fully capable. So some operations knowledge needs to be with everyone, and we have experts that need to know everything. So a half circle here, and maybe this engineering group doesn't need to know about the business side of cloud, so nothing there, and so on and so forth. So front-enders are need to know the basic stuff. Salespersons need to know about business. Designers need to know the basics and something about business, because they are often positioned at the front of projects. Consultants need to know a lot about, or a little about everything. So they need to be broadly skilled or knowledgeable. And for example, a data scientist needs to know about data mainly, and also a little bit about compute, but maybe not so much about operations. and something about business, because they are often doing business-facing products, or at least data. Okay. Before we dive into the how we did it, something about knowledge and experience. Because we are not academics, and even in the academic world, knowledge is useless without skill. So what we aim for is not just the development of knowledge, but we want all of our colleagues to be proficient. So that means they can put their knowledge into practice. So knowledge put into practice is experience. And there's another advantage in aiming for experience and knowledge. Not everyone has the same learning strategy. For example, I'm a top-down learner, so I usually want to experiment first with something new that gives me some knowledge, and then afterwards I read a book or I read some documentation, and that solidifies the experience for me. So it also gives me new knowledge, and then I can put it into practice again, etc., etc. And some of you probably are the other way around. You read a book or do a course first and then put it into practice. So not everyone is the same, neither are our colleagues, and that is why we aim to help as much learning types as possible with our program. Okay, so that's the what cloud proficiency is in our case, and now the how we did it as a company. So the dry theoretical stuff is done now, and now we get into the fun stuff with demos. First, a little bit about our organization again. So we are a network organization, locally optimized, and that's nice and speedy and agile, but it complicates things somewhat if you want to move somewhere collectively. So if you want to transform as a whole, it complicates stuff, because information between cells does not get spread optimally or very fast. So how do you get people to move in the direction you have set as an organization, especially such a distributed one, which this pandemic certainly helped, and almost every organization is now accelerating towards. So we are not the only ones, and most people are not centrally located anymore. So this is a real problem for almost anyone in this business. So you can do a lot of things to solve this, and it really depends on the type of company, the resources you have, the power structure, etc., etc. And what we did is, after considering stuff like learning paths, guided training courses, full curricula, we settled on motivating people. And that is, we don't tell people what to do, but we guide them in a certain direction. So to drive change, we think that motivating our colleagues is the best course of action. And that gives us the greatest chance of succeeding in our cloud native transformation. So if we look at motivation as a driver for learning, motivational theory tells us motivation has 3 pillars. The first one is direction. So that's also known as the goal. So what is the thing you should learn, and what is it not? So you need to have a sense of direction. Otherwise, you don't know how much you have covered, or if you are actually learning anything at all. Everyone can set their personal goals, but we can define a baseline as organizers of the program. Then we have intensity, which is basically the speed at which you learn. So highly motivated people with deadlines, for example, tend to be intensely motivated. Others, not so much. For example, when they have a low intrinsic drive to learn, or maybe they have fear for something new. And the third pillar of motivation is persistence. So this is the amount of time someone keeps at it. So someone keeps learning. Motivation can drop off over time, so it's not a constant. But on the other hand, you can give people a motivational impulse, for example, by setting milestones or doing learning intervals. So together, this is what motivation is in motivational theory. And this is what we use as a basis for our program. So we developed a program. It's called the Cloud Proficiency Program internally. And the goal states that we want to have 100% of our employees to become cloud proficient. And part of the program was the development of 2 web applications. And together, they cover all the pillars of motivation. For direction, you know the goal. We developed the Cloud Proficiency app, which I will demo in a few minutes. And that's a collection of knowledge and pointers. And that enables people to get a sense of what they should do to become cloud proficient. Intensity, the speed at which you learn, and persistence, the amount of time you keep learning, is covered by Cloud the Game. And we try to activate people's intrinsic motivation there by using a serious game format. We also do some extrinsic motivation, by the way, by, for example, awarding people or groups that put in the effort to become cloud proficient. And since persistence can drop off over time, we motivate people in waves. So, for example, by creating temporary competitions and doing so-called game shows. Okay, let's have a quick look at the architecture of the applications and then see the demos of them. So, architecture. What you see here is that we use the AWS Amplify to generate our applications front end and back end. So on the left hand side, you see the client. So our colleagues are accessing this application using their mobile phone or laptop, and they can log in using their existing Microsoft 365 accounts. So we use Azure AD and to authorize and authenticate people. And then we get the application from an S3 bucket, which Amplify generated for us, built for us. And then if you do a request to the backend using your front-end application, Amazon API gateway in the middle there, it parses that request and sends it to a correct handler. For example, if you want a theme, then it goes to a Lambda that is theme oriented, specialized, gets themes from an Amazon DynamoDB database, and sends the data back to the client, which parses it parses the data and creates an overview of themes. Same goes for users and all the other parts that the application consists of. So let's do a demo. So this is our Cloud Proficiency app. So you can see I am logged. Oh, let me enlarge my screen a little. I'm logged in as Piet here. And what you see is what everyone sees. So there are a couple of themes, groups of knowledge. So this is what I discussed earlier, is what basics consist of. So first steps, cloud fundamentals, Azure Foundation, AWS Foundation, Google Cloud. And then you have a group of compute knowledge, serverless, VMs, containers, data, databases, machine learning, analytics, SysOps, so the operational side, security networking, well architected, that's very AWS oriented, DevOps, observability, and lastly, business for the more business oriented people or maybe the data scientists or the designers. And what people can do here is get a sense of direction. So you can get your information here, and you can do whatever you want in your own tempo. But what we do is try to give you a sense of direction. So for example, AWS Foundation, like any other group, consists of 5 sections. The first is concepts. I'll translate this for you. This is all Dutch, I think, yeah. And what we do here is explain the concepts behind AWS. And you can click on this if it's clickable, or you can just read it. Then go on to services. So here we specify specific cloud platform services for foundational stuff. It's not much here. Sources, for example, books, videos, maybe articles. And we categorize them by the difficulty, or at least the amount of pre-knowledge you need to have to be able to parse this. And you can click on it and then go to a website where you can read about it. So for example, this is the shared responsibility model of AWS. And here is an article about regions and availability zones. Then there's the section called achievements, prestaties in Dutch. And here is stuff you can do, so you can practice to gain knowledge about AWS Foundation. For example, creating an IAM user, or maybe making your trusted advisor green. And there's always an extra section for stuff that don't belong in the other 4 categories, and that you can do, like read a newsletter of Screaming in the Cloud, for example. Right. So another example, serverless, since we're in a engineering heavy conference, serverless, the same exact tabs here. Sorry, concepts, services. So these are more serverless oriented AWS and Azure services. We also covered Google Cloud. Sources, for example, a Udemy training or a primer on what serverless is, an introduction in Azure. Or, for example, a AWS reInvent video about serverless Lambda under the hood. That's for advanced people. Achievements and some, this doesn't have access, and so on and so forth. So these give us a sense of direction, if you remember the motivational pillars. Okay, so this is the Cloud Proficiency app. I already gave you a demo, and now we go to the game. So we also have a game which covers the other parts of motivation. So the game is architected almost exactly the same. The only difference, or the main difference, is that we store our data in Aurora serverless, because it doesn't need to be as structured, because we need to be more flexible with our data. One of the reasons is that at the start of our program, we weren't sure what we would do with the data and which direction we should push our colleagues in. So this really helped. And serverless is a great model here. So the same Amplify builds our apps. So we use the framework to create the app. It gets put in a bucket, people can log in, and then all calls are routed through Lambdas, and they are going to query the database, for example, and then return data, which then get parsed, and you see a front end. So demo time, cloud the game. So what you need to do here is you have to log in with your company's account. So I have to do that. And then I get redirected to the application. And what you see here is how I am doing. I'll get back to this. The main thing here is very simple. The only input we need from our players is achievements. So here you can add an achievement. We have several categories. For example, if I read a blog post, I can choose the knowledge category, and then the subcategory is I read a blog or watched a video. And then I have to put in a URL here. And then when I'm done, I can edit. And it's taking a while here. Then it's added, and then that's it for me, input. But then we have a very powerful way to do something with this input. For example, if you put in a certain achievement, you get a badge. For example, it's not all serious. It's a less serious game. For example, if you put something in while there's a full moon out, you get this badge. Or if you did something with Azure, you get, or sorry, Google Cloud, you get this badge. You get one for starting. You get one for sharing your knowledge, or if you did something in each category, etc., etc. So you can get a lot of badges here. And what we don't do is tell our colleagues how. So you have to do a little experiment, and then find out how you can get badges. And the hope is that people tell each other what they did, so they are motivating each other to get more cloud proficient. Back to the front page. So what you can see here is, like in GitHub, how you are doing over time. So if you do a lot of stuff, you get a dark day here. If you do nothing, you get a grayed out day, and anything in between is lighter. So you can see here that I sometimes do a streak of learning, and sometimes I don't do anything for weeks. For example, during my summer vacation here, or during the time the application wasn't live yet. And here I can see how many achievements I had put in the system and how many badges I've earned. What you can see here is what others are doing. So you can see here what the most entered achievements are, or the latest ones. So you can get some inspiration on what to do next. And here you can see how long we have until the end of the year, because it's a program of a year. And I can also see what my cell, so my company's location, is doing. So these are my colleagues, and they are ranked here by points, but you can also rank them by the number of badges they achieved, or the last time they put something in, or their name. And then you can see what badges they got, and you have to guess how they got them. So for example, this guy, Auke, has a streak. I don't know how he did it. I guess he did something a few days in a row. So that's the basics. These are the basics of the application. And what we did was temporarily induce motivation by doing, for example, a competition. So in May of this year, or in June, we did a competition and where we created 2 brackets, which you had to qualify for by entering achievements. And if you entered an achievement and you gained more points than your colleagues, you qualified for the round of 32. For example, this is me. And in round 1, I was put up against one of my colleagues, and I won this round. As you can see here, I entered the most achievements with the most points in that week period. And I got stacked against Bert, and he defeated me. So Bert continued on to against Mike, Mike against Tom, and eventually Mike was the winner of this whole competition. So Bert doesn't have to be ashamed that he lost here. And what's fun here is that Mike is not an engineer. He's a UX designer. And a lot of people here aren't engineers. So what we saw here was that people from all across the company entered into this cloud proficiency transformation. So directors, salespeople, designers, they all went and did something to become more cloud proficient. And to give this another impulse, what we have started last week is the Cloud Olympics. So this is 9 weeks of small competitions. For example, this is a marathon where every cell, every company, sub-company of our organization competes against the others by entering as much course achievements as possible, or speaker achievements, or experience achievements. And we do a weekly announcement of new competitions, and then people can compete against each other. And eventually you get a medal if you've won this game, and the cell with the most medals wins, and they get, I think, a free course on their Christmas dinner. And you can win other prizes as well. And what we also did, in between was do these state of the game shows where we, you can't hear anything, it's in Dutch, but I can talk over it. So what we did here was talk about how the competition went, what we were doing together in our transformation. We highlighted the efforts of some specific colleagues, or we put people in a certain direction by telling them about books or courses. So this was our way to temporarily give this motivation an external impulse. This goes on and on. Okay. Now some numbers, because I can tell you this, but just telling it may not be very convincing. So I've gathered some statistics. So at the x-axis, you can see the year. And during the year, at the start, nobody did anything yet because the application wasn't live. And as soon as it was live, you saw some users going to the application, trying some stuff out, maybe entering some achievements, gaining some badges, very linearly, very slowly. And then we introduced these brackets, so this competition of the 32 against each other. And what we saw here was a huge uptake in the usage of the app. So by June, people entered collectively more than 1,000 achievements, and they gained a lot of badges, and we gained a lot of users. And this went on until the summer vacation. And now we are at the start of the Cloud Olympics, and I expect a similar uptake in activity on this Cloud the Game app. If we zoom into the users and badges, you can see here that the amount of users drops off somewhere because we don't have more than a few hundred colleagues. So this is inevitable. So what is great is that almost everyone is participating, and the amount of badges also drops off, because once you've really seriously entered this application, it gets harder and harder to gain badges. Plus, we did the competition here, and these are summifications. And what we can do is during the program, reintroduce or introduce new badges. Which leads me to my final slide. So what are the results for us, and what can the results be if you do something similar? What we see is a significant increase in cloud proficiency across the board. So technical and non-technical people have put a tremendous effort in our cloud transformation. I'm not saying this lightly, this is really the case. And more concretely, for example, the first 6 months of this program, people achieved more than 50 certifications. So they entered more than 50 certifications in the game alone. And it's not just AWS, but also Azure and Google Cloud, but also other certificates. But they were all cloud oriented. We saw a major shift towards cloud native projects and consultancy. So for the business, this was really good, because this is one of the reasons we wanted to do this cloud transformation. And it's not in the least because our salespeople and consultants were becoming more cloud proficient. We were also able to attract more cloud native talent, because we talked about this and we showed this, and people got into cloud native projects and bumped into other people that were cloud natives. So it has a great network effect. What we also saw was we gained more visibility in the cloud community. One of the things you can enter in the game are experience points and knowledge points, and parts of the subcategories are about getting on stage, writing articles, maybe joining a community, or even organizing meetups or the communities. Which also led to some of our colleagues entering into prestigious community programs run by major cloud providers. But most importantly, or summarizing, we gave our cloud proficiency transformation a huge impulse. So we really see that we are heading towards a successful transformation. And that's not an easy task if you're an organization divided into cells during a pandemic, originally only focusing on Java and .NET and front-end stuff. So we even got certified by AWS for all these certifications that we got in the short term. And what we say is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's an African proverb, which we use a lot. In this case, it means that to become cloud proficient, we need to do this as an organization, as a whole. And that's what we did, and that's what brings us farther than we could have come without this program, I think. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for joining me. And if you have any questions, I'll sit here and wait and answer them.
Hi, Clemens Guggenberger here. Thank you for that interesting talk. I have a question regarding the time that the colleagues set aside for doing that. Was that something to do in the spare time, or did they have a time budget for that, or something like that?
Oh, that's a really good question. Thank you, Clemens, and thank you for the compliment. This is something our colleagues ask a lot as well, because we set the boundaries and the direction, we motivated people, but it is up to people and their mentors and their HR people to determine how much time they want to spend or can spend on their cloud proficiency. So what you see is some people are already highly motivated, or have a lot of energy, or maybe don't have a family, or they do have a family and they have still have high motivation to learn. And these do a lot of stuff in their free time. But we also have ample time for people to, for example, get certified and gain a few free days off to learn and to get the certification. So it really depends. That's my timer, on the use case, and it's mostly a very personal thing that you have to discuss with your manager.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Okay, Clemens Guggenberg again. How much time did it take you to set up the the setup of the whole program? And yeah, exactly what Yannick is asking. How much time did you spend on developing the platform?
Yeah, like Yannick asked now. Okay, so I'll answer both questions then. Thank you, Clemens. Thank you, Yannick. So the first thing we need to, we work in yearly cycles. So we work with objectives and key results. So at the beginning or at the end of last year, the objective was set that we needed to become more cloud proficient. And one of the key results was that all of our colleagues had to become cloud proficient. And one was that we need to be more visible in the community. So these sorts of key results then get picked up by these cells. And what we do is create yearly plans and then organize around stuff that we want to do. For example, in this case, we wanted to gain more cloud knowledge, and we created a program. And then the first thing we did was discuss what is cloud proficiency, because that was the only thing that was in our plans. It was just a term. So the first thing we did was discuss what do we think cloud proficient is, and that's where that part about that matrix came from. And once we had this in place, or this framework of knowledge, then we started to wonder, so how do we motivate our people? So that's where this motivation framework, so the 3 pillars from the motivational theory came from. And then the next step was, how do we do that concretely? So one of the ideas was this and the game show. The other was this cloud proficiency app. And there we split up into sort of projects, project groups. And then we implemented these applications. We did game shows. We asked marketing to help us with creating artwork, for example, and newsletters. And so a lot of people in the organization helped in the way they best could. And then to answer Yannick's question, for example, for the Cloud the Game application, because we used AWS Amplify, thanks to my colleague Everson Cruz, which already did some study on it, we were really quickly in production. I think it took us 1 full day of sprinting or hacking, and then we were into production with the first one. And the nice thing about Amplify is that you already get a CI/CD pipeline, a build pipeline, deployment pipeline. You get all this stuff in place, all these services that you can use without too much configuration or figuring it out. And then you can build on top of that. So we could use our existing front end and back end knowledge and quickly iterate on the application. And what you saw now, the demo, is a result of a few iterations. But I think all in all, we didn't spend much more than a few man weeks, if you could call them call those man weeks. I think a few days in some people's cases. And the cloud, the other app, is also a question of a few days, and then the basics were set up and a few iterations to get to where we are now. So we mostly do this in our off hours, sometimes in our spare time, and sometimes during hackathon sessions. Any other questions? All right. If you want to reach out, you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Just search for my name, Piet van Dongen. Oh, wait, there's a question. Are you planning on using this concept for other topics? Currently, we don't have any plans for other topics, but if you extract the generics of the program, so you want to learn something new, you want to motivate people to do so, and you are in a technical or software-oriented organization. So, for example, in a few years, if we have a new cloud or some sort of paradigm shift, then we could use this framework and these applications to do something similar. Would be really boring for me because I like new stuff, but well, we don't have plans, but it's usable. And what we also see is that some of our clients are interested in this program. So sometimes we do demos, and then these clients say, "Wow, that's very interesting. We are also doing a cloud transformation. Could you help us by, for example, introducing the application?" What we then always say is, "Sure, we could do that, but you need to also do the rest of the motivation parts. And you also need to do game shows, or at least these game periods, competitions, to give the motivation and impulse. So you need to remember that it's just not a technical solution, it's also a very social solution. So you need to have a few colleagues that are a bit creative and free-minded, and you can often recognize them by seeing them adopting new technology first, for example. And these are the people you can leverage or get you to implement this program successfully. Okay, thanks everyone. I'm really pleased with how many people participated. Thank you for the good questions, and have fun today. And hopefully we'll see each other next year in the flesh. Okay, have a nice day.